He was the most dangerous man in Hollywood. Not because he was violent or cruel, because he was magnetic in a way that made it impossible to look away from him, and he knew it, and he used it. And for 50 years, it worked. Jack Nicholson walked into a room, and the room belonged to him. And then one day, without warning, without explanation, the most famous face in American cinema simply walked out the door and never came back. No press release, no farewell, no interview. Just silence from a man who had spent his entire life being the loudest voice in every room. He hasn't made a film since 2010. For over a decade, the world has been asking the same question. What happened to Jack Nicholson? The answer begins not in Hollywood, not on a movie set, not on an Oscar stage. It begins with a lie that his own family told him every single day for 37 years. He was born on April 22, 1937, in Neptune City, New Jersey. His mother's name was Ethel May. His father's name was John Joseph Nicholson. He had an older sister named June. That was the story. That was the family. And for 37 years, Jack Nicholson believed every word of it. None of it was true. June Frances Nicholson was not his sister. She was his mother. A 17-year-old girl who had gotten pregnant and made the kind of desperate choice that families made in 1937, she handed her newborn to her own mother, Ethel May, and the whole family silently agreed to never speak of it again. The baby would be raised as Ethel's son. June would become his sister. His real father was never identified. Nobody ever said his name out loud. Not once. Not ever. June died in 1963. Ethel May died in 1970. They went to their graves without telling him a single word. Jack Nicholson was 37 years old, already one of the biggest stars in Hollywood, on the cover of Time magazine, when a journalist researching his background pulled his birth certificate, and the whole thing unraveled in a single afternoon. Every person who knew the truth was already dead. He would never get to ask why. He would never get to say goodbye to the woman who was actually his mother. He had already buried her 10 years earlier, thinking she was just his sister. He told a reporter it was a pretty dramatic event, but it wasn't what I'd call traumatizing. And maybe that was true, but watch his films. The characters who discover that nothing around them is what it seems. The men who dig under the surface of a perfectly normal life and find something monstrous underneath. And you start to wonder how much of Jack Nicholson, the actor, was built on top of the boy who learned, at 37, that his entire life had been a story someone else wrote for him. He grew up in Ethel May's beauty salon. Women everywhere, women talking, laughing, telling each other the truth about their lives. He later said those years gave him his lifelong understanding of women. Everything they do and everywhere they go, he once said about men, is for a chance to see women. A lot of me being an actor was about that. Which tells you everything about what kind of man Jack Nicholson was going to become. But here is what nobody talks about. Before the Oscars, before the Joker, before the grin became a brand, there was a decade of failure so complete that most men would have given up. And what happened during those 10 years is the thing that made everything else possible. He drove to Los Angeles in 1954 at 17 with no money, no connections, and no plan. He got a job running errands at the MGM cartoon department, the same studio where they made Tom and Jerry. He was talented enough at drawing that they offered him a job as a staff animator. He said no. He had not driven across the country to draw cartoons. He took acting classes, he auditioned, he waited tables, and for over a decade, Jack Nicholson did not become famous. He made cheap horror films for a director named Roger Corman, who was famous for shooting entire movies in 4 days on budgets smaller than most people's rent. The Little Shop of Horrors, The Raven, The Terror, films that nobody saw and nobody remembered. He was grinding away at the very bottom of Hollywood for 10 years, and the top of Hollywood had absolutely no idea he existed. He later said of that period something that sounds like wisdom but must have felt, in the moment, like slow suffocation. When you look at life retrospectively, You rarely regret anything that you did, but you might regret things that you didn't do. He kept doing. He kept showing up. And in 1969, a fight with a knife, or maybe without a knife, depending on who you believed, changed his life forever. Easy Rider was a road film about two bikers crossing America. The role of George Hansen, a drunken small-town lawyer who joins them on the road, was written for actor Rip Torn. Torn dropped out after a violent confrontation with director Dennis Hopper. With production already underway and the role suddenly empty, someone thought of a guy who had been making B-movies for 12 years without anyone noticing. They called Jack Nicholson. He was on screen for less than 40 minutes. In those 40 minutes, he made the entire country fall in love with him. Easy Rider cost $360,000. It made $60 million. Jack Nicholson got his first Oscar nomination. 12 years of nothing, then 40 minutes. That is the kind of math that Hollywood runs on, and the only way to survive it is to never stop showing up. But the overnight success was about to become something no one expected. Because the very next year, he made a film that showed the world he wasn't just a likable face. He was something rarer. He was an actor. 5 Easy Pieces came in 1970. He played Bobby Dupa, a classical pianist who has thrown away his talent and his family to disappear into the oil fields. It was a role designed to show what an actor can do with almost nothing. No action, no villain, no triumph. Just a man sitting with the wreckage of his own choices. And then there was the chicken salad sandwich. Bobby sits in a diner and tries to order wheat toast. The menu doesn't have wheat toast. The waitress won't bend the rules. So Bobby orders a chicken salad sandwich on wheat toast, asks her to hold the butter, hold the lettuce, hold the mayo, and hold the chicken. When she tells him she can't hold the chicken, he says 5 words that America has been repeating for 50 years. I want you to hold it between your knees. She throws him out. He sweeps the glasses off the table on his way to the door. 20 seconds. People are still quoting it. He got his second Oscar nomination. Then Chinatown, then The Last Detail. He was becoming something rare in Hollywood, an actor who made films that mattered. And then came the role that defined him forever. One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, 1975. He played Randall McMurphy, a criminal who fakes mental illness to get out of prison and lands in a psychiatric ward run by a nurse who turns out to be more dangerous than any criminal he's ever met. He prepared for months. He visited psychiatric institutions. He sat with patients. He listened to things that most people walk past without hearing. And on screen, he gave a performance that looked less like acting and more like the pure, unfiltered truth of what it means to be a free man in an unfree world. He won the Academy Award for Best Actor. He was 38 years old. It had taken him 21 years. 5 years later, Stanley Kubrick, one of the most demanding directors alive, put him in a mountain hotel for the winter with a script about madness and an axe. The Shining. They shot some scenes over 100 times. Kubrick rebuilt entire sets after destroying them. He pushed until the actors had nothing left and then asked for one more take. And in one of those takes, Jack Nicholson hacked through a bathroom door and improvised 4 words that had nothing to do with the screenplay. Here's Johnny. Kubrick kept it. The world never forgot it. He was, by 1980, not just a movie star. He was American mythology. And the man who had everything Hollywood could give, the Oscars, the grin, the courtside Lakers seats he'd held since 1970, was about to discover that the thing he wanted most was the one thing his talent couldn't get him. He had been married once. Sandra Knight, an actress, in 1962. A daughter, Jennifer. A divorce in 1968. He never married again. Not because the right woman didn't come along, because she came along in 1973, and he spent 17 years proving he was not ready for her. And by the time he understood what he had, it was already gone. Anjelica Huston was 21 years old when she met Jack Nicholson. He was 36. She was the daughter of director John Huston, a woman of extraordinary intelligence and even more extraordinary patience, which she would need every single day of the next 17 years. They fell in love the way people fall in love when both of them are too proud to admit how badly they want it. Loudly, messily, publicly, and completely. They were Hollywood's most famous couple and its least stable one. Together, then apart, then together again, year after year, for 17 years. He was not faithful in the way most people understand faithfulness. He would be photographed with other women. Rumors would surface. She would hear things she wasn't supposed to hear. And every time, she stayed. She once said of him, "When the chips are down, he's there." 17 years of evidence for that sentence, and 17 years of evidence against it. He later said something that explains everything about who he was with women. "I love women who have a strong sense of themselves because I know I have a pretty good idea of what I want out of life, and I like to be around other people who are also pretty secure. It just makes things easier." What he never said out loud was that the reason he liked secure women was because he was going to need them to survive what he was about to do. In 1989, while he and Anjelica were still together, he met an actress named Rebecca Broussard on a film set. By 1990, she was pregnant with his daughter, Lorraine. By 1992, she had his son, Raymond. Anjelica Huston found out the way women always find out. Too late. Through someone else. About a fact that had already become irreversible. 17 years. Through every other woman, every rumor, every photograph she had chosen not to see. This was the one she couldn't choose not to see, because it was breathing and had his last name. She left. She said later that it wasn't all the other women that finally ended it. It was that one. The one that became a child. Because you can forgive a lot of things in a man you love. You cannot unknow a child. Jack Nicholson later said, with the kind of honesty that is either very brave or very cruel depending on how you hear it, "There were points in my life where I felt oddly irresistible to women. I'm not in that state now, and that makes me sad." He also said, "I haven't had surgery. I don't want to be judgmental, but some of the things you see in Hollywood these days are a bit horrifying." He was the last man in Hollywood you'd expect to talk about getting old. And yet there he was, talking about it, which meant that something had changed. And that change, quiet and slow and nothing like a movie ending, was already underway. He made As Good as It Gets in 1997 and won his third Academy Award, one of only 3 actors in history to do that. He made The Departed for Martin Scorsese in 2006. He was 69 years old and still the most commanding presence in any room he entered. And then, in 2010, he made a forgettable romantic comedy called How Do You Know? And then, Jack Nicholson went home. At first, nobody worried. Actors take breaks. A year passed, then 2, then 5. The tabloids started running stories with unnamed sources just inside his circle. Memory problems, difficulty with lines, isolation. A man who had memorized Shakespeare as a teenager could no longer, according to these sources, hold a script in his head long enough to film a scene. His daughter posted photographs of him at Christmas. He looked fine. His friends, Warren Beatty, the man who had been his closest friend since the 1960s, refused to engage with the rumors. Director James L. Brooks said Nicholson still read scripts. He just hadn't found one worth making. And then, in 2023, he appeared at a Lakers playoff game. The photograph went around the world in 4 hours. He was heavier. He looked like a man who had been living quietly and had decided he didn't mind that the world was surprised. He sat in his courtside seat and watched basketball the way he had been watching basketball for 50 years. In February 2025, he walked onto the SNL 50th anniversary stage with a cane and introduced Adam Sandler with the ease of a man who owns every room he walks into, cane or no cane. The audience responded the way audiences always respond to Jack Nicholson, like they were seeing something they had been afraid they might never see again. And in April 2026, on his 89th birthday, his daughter Lorraine posted a photograph of him at home, sitting with Joni Mitchell, smiling the smile that had been on 1,000 magazine covers and sold 100 million movie tickets. He looked relaxed. He looked happy. He looked like a man who had made his peace with something. He once said, "You are more thoughtful because you don't act as quickly anymore." When I turned 70, it was the first time I felt young for my age. And he said, "I'm definitely still wild at heart, but I've struck biogravity. I can't hit on women in public anymore. I didn't decide this. It just doesn't feel right at my age." That sentence is the key to the disappearance. Not illness, not dementia, not the dramatic collapse that Hollywood always writes for its legends. Just a man who had built his entire identity around being seen, being wanted, being the center of every story, and who discovered, sometime around his 75th year, that he no longer needed any of it. The boy who grew up not knowing who his mother really was became the man who put every version of himself on screen and let the world pick the one it liked best. The man who spent 17 years unable to give Anjelica Houston what she deserved found out, too late, that the thing you take for granted is also the thing that defines you. The actor who improvised "Here's Johnny" in the middle of a take because it felt true became, in the end, the most honest thing Hollywood ever produced. He didn't disappear. He just finally stopped performing. And maybe that is the bravest thing a man who has spent his entire life on stage can do. To look at the audience, and the lights, and the camera, and decide that the last scene has already been filmed, and walk quietly off stage while everyone is still applauding. He is 89 years old. He lives on Mulholland Drive. He reads. He watches basketball. He has 3 Oscars and 5 children, and a grin that never needed an explanation. The performance is over. The man is still here. If his story moved you, take a moment to like and subscribe. We tell the real stories behind Hollywood's greatest legends. I'll see you in the next one.